Jessica, 29, stood frozen in her parents' driveway, staring at the gleaming Tesla Model S they just bought for her sister Amanda. Just last week, when I'd lost my part-time job and asked for help with rent, they claimed financial struggles and told me to be more responsible. Now I clutched a bank statement showing an $85,000 wire transfer for that car. As I pocketed it as evidence, I overheard my mother Carol on the phone. "Don't worry, Jessica will never find out about the trust fund we redirected to Amanda." Before we dive into this story, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Your support helps me share these important experiences that might just help someone feel less alone in their struggles. My childhood was marked by a stark contrast between how my parents treated Amanda and me. From the moment we were born, it was clear that Amanda was the golden child, while I was expected to fend for myself. When we were in elementary school, Amanda struggled with math, so our parents hired private tutors who came 3 times a week at $150 per session. Meanwhile, when I showed interest in advanced science classes, I was told we couldn't afford extra educational resources. I watched as Amanda received brand-name clothing while I shopped at discount stores with my own babysitting money. The pattern continued through high school, where Amanda's mediocre grades were overlooked while my straight-A record was dismissed as expected. When I was accepted to a prestigious university with partial scholarships, our parents initially promised to cover the remaining tuition. 2 weeks before the payment deadline, they changed their minds, claiming unexpected expenses. I ended up taking out substantial student loans while Amanda's entire education at a private college was fully funded. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, calculating my loan payments while my parents discussed which luxury car would be most appropriate for Amanda's graduation gift. The first time I truly understood the depth of their favoritism was during my sophomore year of college. I had worked 2 jobs to save for a study abroad program, and when I finally had enough money, I excitedly shared the news with my family. Instead of celebrating, my father remarked, "Why would you waste money on that? Amanda needs a new laptop for her classes." That same week, they purchased Amanda a $2,000 MacBook Pro while I continued using my 5-year-old laptop that crashed repeatedly. Michael, my boyfriend since college, witnessed these dynamics firsthand. He came from a loving family where resources were distributed fairly, and he was initially shocked by my family's treatment of me. "They can't seriously be that blind to what they're doing," he would say after particularly hurtful family gatherings. I spent years making excuses for them, believing that somehow I deserved less. I convinced myself that Amanda needed more support because she was less capable, that my independence was a strength rather than a necessity imposed upon me. The emotional toll began to manifest in physical symptoms during my early 20s. I developed stress-related migraines and digestive issues that doctors couldn't fully explain. Only when I started therapy did I begin to connect these symptoms to the chronic stress of living in a family where my needs were consistently dismissed. My therapist helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't just normal family dynamics, but emotional neglect and financial favoritism. This realization was both liberating and terrifying. It meant acknowledging that my parents might never change or treat me fairly. Throughout my 20s, the financial disparities only grew more pronounced. When I needed dental work that insurance wouldn't cover, I was told to prioritize better with my budget. Meanwhile, Amanda received regular teeth whitening treatments and cosmetic procedures, all paid for by our parents. The breaking point came when I was 25 and my car broke down beyond repair. I asked if they could help with a down payment on a reliable used vehicle, explaining that I needed it for my job. They refused, suggesting I take public transportation. 3 months later, they bought Amanda a brand new SUV for her 23rd birthday. Each instance of favoritism chipped away at my self-worth, creating a deep-seated belief that I was somehow less deserving of love, attention, and resources. This belief affected my relationships, my career choices, and my ability to advocate for myself in professional settings. Michael often reminded me of my value when I couldn't see it myself, serving as the external validation I desperately needed but never received from my family. The most painful aspect wasn't just the material disparities, but the emotional ones. Amanda's achievements, no matter how small, were celebrated with elaborate dinners and gifts. My accomplishments were often minimized or ignored. When I received a promotion at work, my mother's response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you know Amanda made the dean's list again?" The constant comparison and dismissal created a competitive dynamic between Amanda and me, though I was often unwilling to participate. Amanda seemed to relish her favored status, rarely showing empathy for my situation. She accepted the preferential treatment as her birthright, never questioning whether it was fair or how it affected me. Our relationship became increasingly strained as I began to set boundaries and express my feelings about the unequal treatment. I remember one particularly painful Christmas when our parents gave Amanda a diamond necklace worth thousands of dollars while my gift was a $50 gift card to a bookstore. When I quietly expressed my hurt, I was accused of being materialistic and ungrateful. "We raised you to be independent," my father said sternly. "You should be proud of that." The irony was lost on him, that they had actually forced my independence through years of neglect and favoritism. As I approached my 30th birthday, I began to accept that my relationship with my parents might never be what I wanted it to be. This acceptance was both heartbreaking and freeing. It allowed me to redirect my energy toward building a life with people who valued me unconditionally, starting with Michael and a small circle of friends who had become my chosen family. Little did I know that the greatest betrayals were yet to come, and that the financial and emotional disparities I had experienced my entire life were just the beginning of a much larger pattern of deception and manipulation that would eventually force me to confront my family in ways I never imagined possible. When Michael proposed on our 5th anniversary, I was overjoyed but also anxious about the financial implications of a wedding. We had been saving for a down payment on a house, and I worried that a wedding would derail those plans. My parents seemed genuinely happy for us at first, offering to help with wedding expenses. "You're our only daughter getting married," my mother said. "We want to make it special." This glimmer of parental support gave me hope that perhaps our relationship was evolving. Michael and I began planning a modest wedding, focusing on meaningful elements rather than extravagance. We found a beautiful venue that was reasonably priced, and I was excited about the possibility of my parents contributing to make it slightly more special without breaking the bank. 2 months into our planning, my parents called to say they couldn't help after all. "The economy is struggling," my father explained, "and we've had unexpected expenses." I was disappointed but not entirely surprised, as this pattern of broken promises was familiar. Michael and I adjusted our budget, cutting back further on our plans. What made this particularly painful was discovering that the same month they withdrew their offer to help us, they paid $30,000 for Amanda's extravagant engagement party. I learned about this through a family friend who mentioned it casually, assuming I already knew. The party featured a live band, gourmet catering, and was held at one of the most expensive venues in town. When I confronted my mother about this, she became defensive. "Amanda's fiancé comes from a prominent family," she said. "We need to make a good impression. You and Michael understand, don't you?" The implication was clear. My wedding was less important because Michael's family wasn't wealthy or influential. The engagement ring they bought for Amanda cost $50,000, a fact I discovered when Amanda couldn't resist showing it off at a family gathering. She held out her hand, the diamond sparkling under the lights, and announced, "Mom and Dad wanted to make sure Daniel's family knew we value their son." I felt Michael squeeze my hand under the table, knowing how hurt I must have been. My engagement ring, which Michael had saved for months to buy, suddenly seemed inadequate in comparison. That evening, I finally broke down and confronted my parents about their blatant favoritism. "Why is Amanda's engagement more important than mine?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. "Why do her needs always come before mine?" The conversation quickly escalated. My father accused me of being selfish and jealous. "We've always supported you," he insisted, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. "You've always been so independent, we didn't think you needed as much help." My mother chimed in, "You're being ungrateful." after all we've done for you over the years." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had rewritten history to paint themselves as supportive parents while minimizing the years of neglect and favoritism I had endured. Amanda's reaction was perhaps the most hurtful. When I tried to explain how their actions made me feel, she rolled her eyes and said, "Not everything is about you, Jessica. Can you just be happy for me for once?" Her complete lack of empathy confirmed what I had long suspected. She not only benefited from the favoritism, but actively participated in maintaining it. Michael's family, upon learning of our situation, stepped in to help with wedding costs. "We don't have much," his mother told me privately, "but what we have, we want to share with you." Their generosity brought me to tears, not just because of the financial help, but because it was the first time I felt truly valued by a parental figure. The wedding planning process became increasingly painful as I watched my parents pour resources into Amanda's wedding while ignoring mine. They attended every dress fitting for Amanda, hosted multiple engagement parties, and even took her on a destination bachelorette party to Hawaii. For my wedding, they offered to bake the cake themselves to save money, a gesture that felt more like an insult than genuine support. The final straw came when my mother called to say they wouldn't be able to attend my wedding because it conflicted with a charity gala they had committed to attend. Amanda's future in-laws were major donors. "We'll be there in spirit," my mother said breezily, as if missing her daughter's wedding was no big deal. I hung up the phone, shaking with anger and hurt. Michael found me crying in our bedroom and held me as I finally let out all the pain I had been suppressing for years. "They've never loved me the way they love Amanda," I sobbed. "They never will." The wedding went on without my parents, and despite the pain, it was a beautiful day filled with people who genuinely cared about us. Michael's family stood in for mine in the wedding photos, and my father-daughter dance became a dance with my grandfather, who had always shown me the love and attention my parents withheld. As Michael and I began our married life, I tried to distance myself emotionally from my parents, but the continued favoritism made it impossible. Every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering became another reminder of my second-class status in the family. The resentment I felt was poisoning me from within, affecting my marriage and my overall happiness. Michael gently suggested family therapy, but when I brought it up to my parents, they refused. "There's nothing wrong with our family," my father said indignantly. "You're the one who needs to adjust your attitude." This refusal to acknowledge any wrongdoing only deepened the rift between us. I began to limit my interactions with my family, focusing instead on building a life with Michael and friends who treated me with the love and respect I deserved. Little did I know that the wedding betrayals were just the beginning of a much larger pattern of deception that would eventually force me to confront not just their favoritism, but their outright fraud and manipulation. After our wedding, Michael and I focused on saving for a down payment on our first home. We lived in a small apartment, cutting expenses wherever possible to reach our goal. We tracked every dollar, cooked at home, and postponed vacations. After 2 years of diligent saving, we had accumulated enough for a modest down payment on a small starter home in our area. When we shared our exciting news with my parents, they initially seemed pleased. "That's wonderful news," my mother said. "Let us know if you need any help with closing costs." This offer gave me a small glimmer of hope that perhaps they were finally recognizing my achievements and wanting to support them. We began house hunting, looking at properties within our budget that would need some work but had good bones. We found a promising fixer-upper in a decent neighborhood and started the process of making an offer. That's when my parents called to say they wouldn't be able to help with closing costs after all. "The market is so unpredictable right now," my father explained, "and we need to keep our liquid assets available." I was disappointed but not surprised by this reversal. Michael and I adjusted our plans again, determined to make it work on our own. What made this particularly painful was discovering through a real estate agent friend that my parents had given Amanda $100,000 for a luxury apartment in the city's most expensive neighborhood. My friend Rachel, who worked in real estate, mentioned the transaction casually during lunch. "Your parents bought such a beautiful place for your sister," she said. "2 bedrooms with a view of the park. Must have cost a fortune." When I asked for details, Rachel showed me the listing, which had sold for well over $1 million. There was no way Amanda could afford such a place on her own as a junior marketing executive. I confronted my parents about this discrepancy, armed with specific information about the apartment. Their reaction was defensive and dismissive. Amanda needs to be in a good location for her career, my mother explained. And her building has security and amenities that are important for a single woman. What about my need for a safe home? I asked, my voice trembling with frustration. Don't I deserve to feel secure in my living situation too? My father sighed impatiently. You and Michael are doing fine on your own. Amanda needs more help because she's not as practical as you are. This justification made no sense to me. If I was more capable and responsible, shouldn't that be rewarded rather than punished? Instead, my competence seemed to be used as a reason to withhold support. During this difficult time, my best friend Victoria encouraged me to seek legal advice. This isn't just favoritism anymore, she said over coffee one afternoon. There might be legal implications to how they're handling their assets, especially if there's an inheritance involved. I was hesitant to consider legal action against my own parents, but Victoria's words planted a seed of curiosity. The situation became even more painful when Amanda invited us to her housewarming party. As we toured her beautifully decorated apartment, complete with designer furniture and top-of-the-line appliances, she made several comments about our tiny apartment and modest lifestyle. I don't know how you live in such a small space, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I'd go crazy without room to breathe. Michael squeezed my hand, sensing my rising anger. Later that evening, as we were leaving, Amanda pulled me aside. You know, if you were smarter with your money, you could afford a nice place like this too, she whispered, as if sharing a secret. Maybe I could give you some financial advice. The irony of her offering financial advice while living in an apartment our parents had paid for was almost laughable. I simply nodded and walked away, knowing that any response would only lead to conflict. The breaking point came when I discovered that my parents had been lying about their financial status for years. Through a series of unexpected circumstances, I learned that they were actually quite wealthy, with significant investments and properties. Their claims of financial struggles were completely fabricated, designed to justify their unequal treatment of their daughters. This revelation was both shocking and validating. It confirmed that their favoritism wasn't born of necessity, but of choice, a deliberate decision to prioritize Amanda's needs and desires over mine. I began to question everything about my relationship with my parents. If they could lie so blatantly about their finances, what else were they hiding? The realization that they would never treat me fairly, regardless of their financial situation, was both heartbreaking and liberating. It freed me from the false hope that if I just waited long enough or proved myself worthy enough, they would eventually treat me with the same love and support they showed Amanda. Victoria's suggestion to seek legal advice began to seem more reasonable. If my parents were wealthy enough to support both daughters equally, but chose not to, there might be legal options available to me. I made an appointment with a family lawyer, not with the intention of suing my parents, but simply to understand my rights and options. As I sat in the lawyer's office, explaining my situation, I felt a mix of emotions, guilt for considering legal action against my own family, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For the first time, I was taking concrete steps to protect myself and my future, rather than passively accepting the unfair treatment I had endured my entire life. Walking into Gregory's law office felt like crossing an invisible line I never thought I would cross. The office was professional yet welcoming, with bookshelves lining the walls and diplomas from prestigious universities. Gregory, a family lawyer in his late 50s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, listened patiently as I explained my situation. Financial favoritism between siblings isn't uncommon, he said when I finished, but what you're describing goes beyond typical parental preference. The fact that your parents have significant resources but choose to withhold them from you raises some interesting legal questions. He explained that if my parents had made verbal or written promises to support me financially, there might be grounds for a claim based on promissory estoppel. More importantly, he suggested we investigate whether any of my parents' assets were built on my childhood earnings. I had almost forgotten about the brief modeling and acting work I had done as a child. From ages 8 to 12, I had appeared in several commercials and print ads, earning a substantial amount of money that my parents had managed on my behalf. Any money earned by a minor in the entertainment industry is supposed to be placed in a protected trust account, Gregory explained. If your parents used that money for other purposes, they may have violated child labor laws. This revelation was shocking. I had assumed that my childhood earnings had been saved for my future, perhaps as a college fund. The possibility that my parents had used that money to support their lifestyle or fund Amanda's privileges was infuriating. As we delved deeper into my family's financial history, Amanda became engaged to Daniel, the son of a prominent local family. My parents immediately began planning an extravagant wedding with no expense spared. The engagement alone was celebrated with a party that reportedly cost over $50,000, featuring a celebrity chef and live entertainment. When I wasn't invited to the engagement party, I wasn't surprised but still hurt. When I asked my mother about it, she claimed the venue had limited space and that only close family and the groom's family were invited. The irony that I wasn't considered close family wasn't lost on me. As Amanda's wedding planning accelerated, my parents became increasingly distant. They canceled our weekly dinners, claiming they were too busy with wedding preparations. When I mentioned that Michael and I were celebrating our anniversary, my mother barely acknowledged it before changing the subject to wedding dress shopping with Amanda. The most painful moment came when my parents tried to exclude me completely from Amanda's wedding. Amanda feels that your presence might be distracting, my father explained over the phone. She wants the focus to be on her special day. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only was I being excluded from my own sister's wedding, but they were using Amanda as an excuse to justify their continued rejection. During this time, Gregory helped me file formal requests for financial records related to my childhood earnings. The process was emotionally draining, requiring me to confront years of manipulation and neglect. What we discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Not only had my parents used my earnings for general expenses, but they had also removed my name from a family trust without my knowledge or consent. "This is serious," Gregory said, reviewing the documents. "Your parents may have committed fraud by removing you from this trust without proper notification." The trust had been established by my grandparents, specifically to provide for both grandchildren equally. My parents had apparently amended the trust to redirect my portion to Amanda, claiming that I didn't need the funds because I was more independent and financially responsible. Learning that Amanda was aware of this deception was perhaps the most painful betrayal. During a heated conversation, she admitted that she knew about the trust, but saw nothing wrong with receiving my share. "You've always been better with money than I have," she said defensively. "Mom and Dad just wanted to make sure we were both taken care of in the way we needed." Her complete lack of remorse or understanding of the injustice was staggering. Gregory explained my legal options, which included filing a lawsuit against my parents for breach of fiduciary duty and potential fraud. The idea of suing my own parents was terrifying, not just because of the emotional toll, but also because of the potential family fallout. "They're already treating you this way," Victoria reminded me when I expressed my hesitation. How much worse could it get? Her words resonated with me. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my parents' love and approval, sacrificing my own needs and desires in the process. Maybe it was time to prioritize myself for a change. As I weighed my options, Amanda's wedding approached with breathtaking speed and expense. The invitations were engraved on heavy cardstock, the registry included luxury items I couldn't afford, and the venue was a historic estate that reportedly cost $20,000 just to rent. The night before the wedding, my mother called to ask if I would be willing to help with setup and cleanup. "We're trying to save money by not hiring extra staff," she explained casually. The irony that they were spending hundreds of thousands on the wedding, but couldn't afford to pay people to work was not lost on me. I politely declined, citing a prior commitment that didn't actually exist. I simply couldn't bring myself to participate in the celebration of my own exclusion. The day of the wedding, I received a text from a cousin who was attending, featuring photos of the lavish event. Amanda looked like a princess in her designer gown, my parents beaming with pride beside her. There was no mention of me, no acknowledgement that I even existed. As I looked at those photos, something inside me shifted. The pain and sadness I had carried for so long began to transform into something else, determination. I had spent my entire life accepting less than I deserved, believing that somehow I was the problem. But seeing the evidence of their continued favoritism, their willingness to exclude me completely from family celebrations, I realized that I wasn't the problem. They were. That evening, I called Gregory and told him I was ready to move forward with legal action. "I don't want to hurt them," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "But I can't let them continue to hurt me either." He assured me that we would proceed carefully, with the goal of reaching a fair resolution rather than unnecessary escalation. Little did I know that this decision would set in motion a series of events that would expose even deeper betrayals and force my family to confront the consequences of their actions. 3 months after filing the initial legal documents against my parents, I began experiencing severe abdominal pain. At first, I tried to ignore it, attributing it to stress from the ongoing legal battle. But as the pain intensified, Michael insisted I see a doctor. After several tests and scans, I received a diagnosis that would change everything. I needed emergency surgery to remove a large ovarian cyst that had ruptured. Without insurance coverage through my job, which I had recently left to start my own business, the medical bills were overwhelming. The surgery alone would cost over $20,000, not including hospital stays, anesthesia, and follow-up care. I called my parents, swallowing my pride and explaining the situation. "I know we're not on the best terms right now," I said, my voice tight with pain and anxiety, "but this is a medical emergency. I need help." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before my father responded. "We're sorry to hear about your health issues," he said, his tone formal and distant, "but we're experiencing some financial difficulties right now. The legal action you've taken has created unexpected expenses." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were blaming me for their financial problems that didn't even exist, as I now knew they were quite wealthy. "What about Amanda's wedding?" I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. "That must have cost a fortune." "That was different," my mother interjected, her voice sharp. "That was a family celebration. These are your medical expenses." The implication was clear. My health was less important than Amanda's wedding celebrations. The call ended with them promising to think about it, but offering no concrete help. As I hung up the phone, tears of pain and frustration streamed down my face. Michael held me as I cried, his expression a mixture of anger and concern. "We'll figure this out," he said firmly. "I'll take on a second job if we have to." True to his word, Michael immediately began looking for additional work, despite already working full-time as a software engineer. The thought of him sacrificing so much while my parents had ample resources was infuriating. 2 days later, while waiting for my surgery in the hospital, I made a shocking discovery. A nurse came in with some paperwork, and as she was going through my file, she mentioned something about a recent payment for a procedure. "It looks like your parents' insurance was billed for a procedure last month," she said casually. "Daniel Maxwell? That's your brother-in-law, right?" The name caught my attention. Daniel was Amanda's fiancé. According to the nurse, my parents had paid for Daniel's elective cosmetic procedure the previous month. A procedure that cost over $15,000. They had claimed they were too broke to help with my life-saving surgery, but had no problem paying for Daniel's vanity procedure. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. I was lying in a hospital bed, facing mounting medical bills and a serious health crisis, while they were funding cosmetic procedures for my brother-in-law. This discovery solidified my resolve to pursue the legal action against them. The surgery went well, but the recovery was difficult both physically and emotionally. Amanda came to visit once, bringing an expensive bouquet of flowers that must have cost at least $100. She spent most of the visit complaining about the stress of wedding planning and how difficult it was to coordinate with vendors. "You're lucky you don't have to deal with all this," she said, completely oblivious to the irony of her statement. "It's so exhausting." Michael, meanwhile, was working 2 jobs, coming home exhausted but still trying to take care of me. The guilt I felt for putting him in this position was immense. "This isn't fair to you," I told him one evening as he massaged my sore feet. "You shouldn't have to sacrifice so much because my parents won't help me." "We're a team," he said simply. "That's what marriage is about, supporting each other through the hard times." His unwavering support was a stark contrast to my parents' continued neglect. During my recovery, I began finding documents that suggested my parents had been hiding assets for years. Going through old files at their house, with permission, as I was helping my mother organize, I discovered offshore accounts and shell corporations designed to shield their wealth. These weren't the actions of people struggling financially. They were the actions of wealthy individuals deliberately concealing their resources. The emotional toll of these discoveries was immense. I spent many sleepless nights grappling with the reality that my parents had been lying to me my entire life, not just about their financial situation, but about their love and concern for my well-being. The most painful realization was that their neglect wasn't born of necessity but of choice. A deliberate decision to prioritize Amanda's needs and desires over mine, even when my health was at stake. As I recovered physically, I grew stronger emotionally. The anger and hurt I felt began to transform into determination. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their love and approval, sacrificing my own needs in the process. Now, I was beginning to understand that their love was conditional and their approval was something I would never receive, no matter how much I sacrificed. This realization was both heartbreaking and liberating. It freed me from the false hope that if I just waited long enough or proved myself worthy enough, they would eventually treat me with the same love and support they showed Amanda. With renewed resolve, I contacted Gregory and shared my new discoveries. "This changes everything," he said, reviewing the documents I had found. "We're not just dealing with favoritism anymore, we're dealing with deliberate fraud and deception." We began preparing for a more aggressive legal strategy, one that would hold my parents accountable not just for their financial misconduct, but for the emotional and psychological damage they had caused. As I stood at this crossroads, I knew that the path ahead would be difficult. Confronting my parents in court would undoubtedly cause further rifts in our already fractured family. But for the first time, I was choosing to prioritize myself and my well-being over maintaining a relationship built on inequality and deception. The decision to move forward with legal action wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about justice and self-preservation. It was about reclaiming the power and agency I had surrendered for too long and creating a future where my worth wasn't determined by my parents' conditional love and approval. As my legal case against my parents progressed, I made a discovery that would shake the very foundation of our family dynamic. While sorting through old boxes in my grandparents' attic, boxes my parents had told me were filled with worthless junk, I found a locked metal chest. Inside, I discovered documents that revealed a shocking truth about my inheritance. My grandparents had left me a significant inheritance when they passed away 10 years earlier. $500,000 designated specifically for my education, first home, and future security. What was shocking was that I had never been informed of this inheritance. According to the documents, my parents had intercepted the funds, forging my signature on legal documents to gain access to the money. The inheritance had been placed in a trust that required both parents' signatures and mine for any withdrawals. But somehow, they had managed to bypass this requirement, likely through forgery or misrepresentation. As I read through the documents, my hands shook with a mixture of anger and disbelief. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was outright theft and fraud. The money that could have paid for my college education, eliminated my student loans, or provided a down payment for our home had been stolen by my own parents. The most painful discovery was a letter from my grandmother, written shortly before her death, expressing her wish that the inheritance would help me pursue my dreams without financial constraints. Jessica has always been such a responsible and caring child, she wrote. I worry that her parents don't recognize her full potential. This inheritance is my way of ensuring she has the opportunities she deserves. Reading those words brought tears to my eyes. My grandmother had seen me and valued me in a way my parents never had. She had wanted to provide for my future, to give me the opportunities my parents consistently denied me. And they had stolen that from me. Armed with this new evidence, I confronted Amanda first, hoping against hope that she might have been unaware of this deception. We met at a neutral coffee shop, and I laid out the documents on the table between us. As she read through them, her expression remained surprisingly calm. I knew about the inheritance, she admitted finally, not meeting my eyes. Mom and Dad told me about it years ago. And you didn't think to mention it to me? I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. They said you didn't need it, she replied defensively. You've always been so independent and capable. They wanted to make sure I was taken care of, because I'm not as good with money as you are. Her justification was almost identical to the one my parents had used for years. A twisted logic that painted my competence as a reason to withhold support. So you knew they were stealing from me, and you were okay with that? I pressed, my anger rising. It wasn't stealing, she insisted, her voice rising. It was redistributing resources within the family. That's not the same thing. The casual way she dismissed the theft of my inheritance was staggering. There was no remorse, no acknowledgement of the injustice, only a desperate attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Our conversation ended with Amanda storming out, leaving me alone with the documents that proved the extent of my parents' betrayal. The next step was confronting my parents directly. Gregory advised me to do this with him present, to ensure the conversation remained productive and legally sound. We arranged a meeting at their home, a place that had never felt welcoming to me but now felt like enemy territory. As I presented the evidence of the stolen inheritance, their reactions were telling. My mother became defensive and emotional, claiming that they had intended to tell me eventually. We were just keeping it safe for you, she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. The market was volatile, and we didn't want you to make any rash decisions. My father, however, became angry and aggressive. This is none of your business, he snapped, his face turning red. We've always managed the family finances, and we've done a damn good job of it. Gregory calmly explained the legal implications of their actions, including potential criminal charges for forgery and fraud. The possibility of facing actual consequences seemed to give them pause, but neither parent showed genuine remorse for what they had done. Instead, they focused on defending their actions and minimizing the harm they had caused. You've turned out fine, my father said dismissively. You have a good job, a nice apartment. What difference does it make where the money came from? The difference, I explained through tears, was that their actions had caused me years of financial struggle and emotional pain. The student loans I had been paying for a decade could have been avoided. The down payment for our home could have been provided without sacrificing. The emergency surgery I had just undergone could have been paid for without Michael taking on a second job. This isn't just about money, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. This is about years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I didn't deserve the same love and support as Amanda. This is about the constant stress and anxiety of never knowing if I would have enough to cover basic expenses while you were funding her luxury lifestyle. The meeting ended without resolution, but with a clear understanding of where we stood. My parents had no intention of acknowledging the harm they had caused or making amends. They were focused only on protecting themselves from legal consequences. Gregory advised me to file a lawsuit against my parents for the stolen inheritance, in addition to the existing legal action. This is a clear case of financial exploitation, he explained. The law is on your side in this. As I prepared to escalate the legal battle, Daniel's role in covering up the inheritance scheme became clear. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Daniel had helped my parents move money between accounts to conceal the inheritance from legal discovery. He had also advised them on how to create a paper trail that would make it difficult to trace the stolen funds. This revelation was particularly painful because Daniel had always presented himself as a neutral party in our family dynamics. He had often played the role of mediator during conflicts, suggesting that I was being too sensitive or misunderstanding my parents' intentions. Now, it was clear that he had been actively participating in their deception. The emotional toll of these discoveries was immense. I spent many sleepless nights grappling with the reality that my own parents had stolen from me, that my sister had known about it and condoned it, and that my brother-in-law had helped cover it up. The betrayal was absolute and devastating. Victoria and Michael were my rocks during this difficult time. Victoria helped me channel my anger into productive action, while Michael provided the emotional support I needed to keep going. "You're not alone in this," Victoria reminded me during one of our many phone calls. "You have people who love and support you unconditionally." Her words were a comforting reminder that family isn't just about blood relations, but about the people who choose to love and support us. As I prepared for the next phase of legal action, I felt a mixture of emotions: anger at the betrayal, sadness for the relationship I would never have with my parents, and determination to seek justice. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, I was confident that I was doing the right thing. Not just for myself, but for anyone who had experienced similar treatment at the hands of those who were supposed to love and protect them. Filing the lawsuit against my parents sent shockwaves through our family and their social circle. The legal documents, once served, made the allegations public record, and suddenly our private family drama became community knowledge. The initial reaction from my parents was predictable: denial and counterattack. They immediately went on the defensive, painting themselves as victims of my ungratefulness and greed. Within days of the lawsuit being filed, I received a call from my aunt, my father's sister, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. "I just heard about what's happening," she said, her voice filled with concern. "Your parents are telling everyone that you've always been jealous of Amanda and that you're trying to extort money from them." This wasn't surprising, but it still hurt to hear how quickly they had twisted the narrative to make themselves the victims. The counterattack intensified as my parents and Amanda began a campaign to discredit me. They shared carefully selected stories with family and friends, highlighting instances where I had been difficult or demanding while conveniently omitting the years of neglect and favoritism I had endured. Amanda played her part perfectly, presenting herself as the innocent victim caught in the middle. "I never wanted any of this," she told a mutual friend, who later relayed the conversation to me. "I've always tried to be a good sister, but Jessica has always been so competitive and resentful." Daniel joined in the effort to discredit me, spreading rumors about my marriage and questioning Michael's motives for supporting me. "He's just after whatever money Jessica might get from the lawsuit," he suggested to one of Michael's colleagues. "Why else would he stick around through all this drama?" These rumors were particularly hurtful because they attacked not just me but Michael as well, questioning his integrity and the authenticity of our relationship. Despite the attacks, I found unexpected allies in extended family members who had also experienced my parents' manipulative behavior. My cousin Emily, whom I hadn't seen in years, reached out to share her own experiences. "Your parents did something similar to me when I was younger," she explained over coffee. "They promised to help with my college tuition, but then changed their minds at the last minute. I always thought it was just me, but hearing your story makes me realize this is a pattern with them." Other family members came forward with similar stories, creating a clearer picture of my parents' long history of manipulation and favoritism. These testimonials would prove invaluable as the legal case progressed, providing context and credibility to my claims. As I gathered allies, I also discovered additional evidence of financial fraud committed by my parents. Through the legal discovery process, we obtained bank records and financial documents that revealed a pattern of deceptive practices designed to conceal their wealth and manipulate their assets. One particularly damning discovery was a series of offshore accounts where they had hidden money to avoid taxes and create the appearance of financial struggle. These accounts contained millions of dollars, contradicting their claims of limited resources. We also found evidence that they had been using family business funds to pay for personal expenses, including Amanda's luxury lifestyle. This discovery opened up additional legal implications, potentially exposing them to charges of tax evasion and business fraud. As the case progressed, Amanda became increasingly desperate to maintain her lifestyle. With her parents' financial resources potentially at risk, she began to worry about her future security. This desperation led to a series of panicked phone calls and messages, alternating between threats and appeals to our family bond. "You're going to ruin everyone's lives," she said during one particularly heated conversation. "Is that what you want? To see mom and dad in jail? To see me lose everything?" The emotional manipulation was familiar, but it no longer had the same effect on me. Years of therapy and self-reflection had helped me recognize these tactics for what they were: attempts to control me through guilt and fear. My confidence grew as I built my case, not just legally but emotionally. Each piece of evidence I gathered, each ally who came forward, strengthened my resolve to see this through to the end. Michael's unwavering support was crucial during this time. He listened patiently as I processed each new discovery, offering perspective and comfort when I felt overwhelmed. "Remember why you're doing this," he would remind me. "It's not about revenge. It's about justice and accountability." The legal battle also took a toll on my professional life. As a small business owner, I didn't have the luxury of paid time off or flexible hours. Court appearances, meetings with lawyers, and the emotional stress of the case all demanded time and energy I didn't always have. Some days, it was all I could do to keep my business running while dealing with the personal challenges of the lawsuit. Despite these difficulties, I found that the experience was also strengthening my character and resilience. I was learning to advocate for myself in ways I never had before, to set boundaries, and to prioritize my own well-being over maintaining peace at any cost. As the case moved toward trial, my parents made several attempts to settle out of court, likely to avoid the public exposure that a trial would bring. Their offers were insulting, proposing minimal payments that wouldn't even cover my legal fees, let alone the stolen inheritance or damages for years of neglect. "We're willing to offer you $50,000 to drop the case," my father said during one settlement meeting. "That's more than generous, considering your ungrateful attitude toward the family." Gregory advised me to reject these offers, explaining that the evidence we had gathered was strong enough to potentially win a much larger judgment at trial. "They're trying to buy their way out of accountability," he explained. "Don't let them." The most shocking development came when Amanda and Daniel attempted to bribe Victoria to testify against me. They approached her at a local restaurant, offering her $10,000 to provide false testimony about my mental stability and the supposed lies I had told about my family. Victoria recorded the conversation and immediately reported it to me and Gregory. "They're getting desperate," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "This is criminal behavior, not just family drama." This attempted bribery became a crucial piece of evidence, demonstrating the lengths to which my family would go to avoid accountability. It also strengthened my case by providing clear evidence of their unethical and potentially illegal behavior. As the trial date approached, I felt a mixture of emotions: anxiety about the public exposure, determination to see justice served, and sadness for the complete breakdown of my family relationships. But beneath it all was a growing sense of peace and empowerment. I had spent years feeling powerless in the face of my family's manipulation and neglect. Now, through the legal system, I was reclaiming my power and holding them accountable for their actions. The counterattack had been vicious and painful, but it had also revealed the truth about my family's dynamics. It had shown me who my real allies were and given me the strength to stand up for myself, even when it was difficult. As I prepared for the trial, I knew that whatever the outcome, I had already won in the ways that mattered most. I had found my voice, reclaimed my power, and chosen to prioritize myself over maintaining a toxic family dynamic. The morning of the trial arrived with an unseasonable chill that mirrored the coldness in my heart as I prepared to face my family in court. Michael drove me to the courthouse, his hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze mine in silent support. Victoria met us at the entrance, her presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in this battle. The courtroom was more intimidating than I had imagined, with its high ceilings, wooden paneling, and the judge's elevated bench that seemed to represent authority and judgment. As we waited for the proceedings to begin, I watched my parents and Amanda enter with their legal team. They avoided eye contact with me, instead whispering among themselves with expressions of concern and innocence. Daniel was notably absent, which I later learned was because he had been called out of town on urgent business, a convenient excuse to avoid testifying about his role in the inheritance scheme. The trial began with opening statements from both sides. My parents' attorney painted a picture of a loving family being torn apart by a disgruntled daughter seeking financial gain. This is not a case of theft or fraud, he insisted, but a misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion. Gregory's opening statement was powerful and compelling, outlining the evidence of financial misconduct and emotional manipulation we had gathered. This isn't just about money, he told the jury. This is about a pattern of systematic favoritism and deception that has caused significant harm to my client. The first few days of testimony were difficult, as my parents took the stand one after the other, presenting themselves as caring parents who had always done their best for both daughters. They cried at strategic moments, describing their disappointment and hurt at being sued by their own child. Their performance was convincing, and I found myself momentarily questioning whether I was being too harsh, whether I had misinterpreted their intentions. But as the trial progressed and more evidence was presented, the cracks in their story began to show. Bank records, emails, and testimony from other family members painted a different picture. One of deliberate deception and financial manipulation. The turning point came when Gregory called me to the stand. As I testified about years of favoritism and neglect, about the stolen inheritance and the emotional toll it had taken, I felt a sense of release. For the first time, I was speaking my truth in a setting where it couldn't be dismissed or minimized. During cross-examination, my parents' attorney tried to paint me as jealous and resentful, but Gregory's careful preparation helped me remain calm and focused on the facts of the case. The most dramatic moment came when Gregory presented the evidence of my childhood earnings that had been misappropriated by my parents. The financial expert we had hired testified about the child labor laws they had violated and the specific ways they had diverted my income to their own use. As the expert explained the legal implications of their actions, I watched my parents' faces change from confident to concerned. The next day, Amanda took the stand, and her testimony became increasingly defensive and inconsistent under cross-examination. When Gregory asked directly about her knowledge of the stolen inheritance, she became flustered and contradictory. I didn't know the details, she stammered, but I trusted that my parents were doing what was best for everyone. Did you think it was best for your sister to be denied the inheritance her grandparents left specifically for her? Gregory pressed. Did you think it was fair that you benefited from money that was meant for her education and future security? Amanda's composure finally broke down. It's not fair, she burst out, tears streaming down her face. Nothing about this is fair. But that's how it's always been. Jessica has always been the smart one, the responsible one. I've always needed more help. What's so wrong with parents wanting to help the child who needs it more? Her emotional outburst revealed the core of her worldview, that need, not merit or fairness, should determine parental support. It was a twisted logic that had justified years of unequal treatment. The most shocking revelation came when Gregory presented evidence of my parents' plan to disinherit me completely. We had discovered emails between my father and their estate attorney discussing how to rewrite their will to leave everything to Amanda, citing my ungratefulness and disloyalty as justification. Given Jessica's recent actions against the family, the email read, "We believe it would be inappropriate to leave her any portion of our estate. We need to protect Amanda's future from her sister's greed and vindictiveness." Reading this email in court was devastating, but it also removed any remaining doubt I had about their intentions. They weren't just misguided or mistaken, they were deliberately and systematically working to exclude me from the family, both emotionally and financially. Daniel's absence from the trial became more suspicious when we presented evidence of his role in helping my parents conceal their assets. The bank records showed transfers between accounts that he had facilitated, creating a paper trail designed to hide their wealth from legal discovery. The judge listened intently as Gregory explained how these transfers were part of a larger pattern of financial deception. As the trial neared its conclusion, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. The jury seemed increasingly sympathetic to my case, and my parents' confident demeanor had been replaced by visible anxiety. Their attorney's arguments became more desperate, and even he seemed to recognize that the evidence against them was overwhelming. The final blow came when Victoria testified about the attempted bribery, playing the recording of Amanda and Daniel's offer to pay her for false testimony. The courtroom fell silent as Amanda's voice filled the room, offering money in exchange for lies about my mental stability and character. The judge watched with an expression of stern disapproval, and even my parents looked shocked by this blatant evidence of wrongdoing. After both sides rested their cases, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours before returning with a verdict. As the forepersons stood to read the decision, I felt Michael's hand tighten around mine, a silent acknowledgement of whatever outcome was about to be announced. On the count of financial fraud regarding the inheritance, we find in favor of the plaintiff, the foreperson began, continuing through each charge with the same outcome. By the time she finished, the jury had found in my favor on every count, awarding me not just the full amount of the stolen inheritance, but additional damages for emotional distress and financial hardship. The media coverage of the high-profile family case was immediate and intense. Local news outlets ran stories about the million-dollar inheritance battle, and the case became a cautionary tale about family dynamics and financial exploitation. My parents' attempts to maintain their public image as generous community members were shattered by the very public exposure of their actions. In the days following the verdict, the consequences for my family began to unfold. The judge referred the case to the district attorney for potential criminal charges related to the forgery and financial fraud. Their business partners began to distance themselves, concerned about being associated with such scandal. Amanda and Daniel's relationship fell apart under the stress of the legal and financial consequences. With her parents' wealth now at risk and her own reputation tarnished by the trial testimony, Amanda found herself facing an uncertain future for the first time in her life. Daniel, once so confident in his position as part of a wealthy family, abandoned Amanda when it became clear that her financial security was no longer guaranteed. As I left the courthouse that day, surrounded by Michael and Victoria, I felt a mixture of emotions. Relief that the legal battle was over, sadness for the complete breakdown of my family relationships, and a growing sense of peace. The victory wasn't just about the money, it was about validation, about being seen and heard after years of being dismissed and minimized. The climax of this story wasn't just the courtroom victory, but the personal transformation I had undergone throughout the process. I had entered the legal battle as a wounded daughter seeking justice, and I emerged as a confident woman who had reclaimed her power and chosen to prioritize her own well-being over maintaining a toxic family dynamic. The months following the trial were a period of adjustment and healing. The legal victory brought financial security, but the emotional journey of recovery was more complex. With the inheritance restored and additional damages awarded, Michael and I were finally able to buy the home we had dreamed of, a modest but beautiful house with a garden where I could plant flowers and find peace. The first night in our new home, I sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Michael brought me a cup of tea and wrapped his arms around me as we sat in comfortable silence. "We made it," he said softly, and I nodded, tears of gratitude and relief streaming down my face. My parents faced significant legal consequences for their fraud. The district attorney brought charges against them for forgery and financial exploitation, resulting in probation and community service. More damaging to them was the public exposure of their actions, which affected their social standing and business relationships. The community that had once seen them as generous benefactors now viewed them with suspicion and judgment. Amanda and Daniel's relationship continued to deteriorate as they faced the financial and social fallout from the trial. Without her parents' unlimited financial support, Amanda struggled to maintain the lifestyle to which she had become accustomed. Daniel, faced with the reality of her diminished financial prospects, eventually ended their relationship, citing irreconcilable differences. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Amanda was working a regular job for the first time in her life, learning to live within a budget and navigate financial challenges on her own. Part of me felt a sense of satisfaction at this turn of events, but another part felt a twinge of compassion for someone who had never been taught to be independent or self-sufficient. My journey of healing involved setting clear boundaries with my family. I made the difficult decision to limit contact with my parents and Amanda, recognizing that their presence in my life would only continue to cause pain and turmoil. This wasn't about punishment or revenge, but about self-preservation and creating space for genuine healing. I found unexpected support from extended family members who had witnessed my parents' behavior over the years. My cousin Emily became a close confidant, sharing her own experiences of manipulation and helping me process the complex emotions that surfaced during this period. These connections helped me understand that I wasn't alone in my experiences and that family dysfunction wasn't something I had to carry in silence. As I healed, I felt compelled to help others who had experienced similar family financial abuse. With some of the money from the settlement, I started a foundation to provide legal assistance and emotional support to individuals dealing with financial exploitation by family members. The foundation, called Family Financial Justice, became a meaningful way to transform my painful experience into something positive that could help others. Through this work, I met many people with stories similar to mine, tales of parental favoritism, stolen inheritances, and financial manipulation. These connections reinforced that what I had experienced wasn't unique, but part of a larger pattern of family dysfunction that often remained hidden behind closed doors. One of the most important aspects of my healing journey was learning to redefine family on my own terms. Michael and I created traditions and rituals that were meaningful to us, building a life based on mutual respect, support, and genuine care. We hosted holiday gatherings for friends who had become family, creating a chosen family that loved and accepted me unconditionally. Therapy played a crucial role in my recovery, helping me process the trauma of my childhood and the betrayal of my parents. My therapist helped me understand that healing wasn't about forgetting or forgiving, but about integrating these experiences into my life story in a way that no longer defined or controlled me. I learned to acknowledge the pain without allowing it to dictate my present or future. As the first anniversary of the trial approached, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The anger and resentment that had once consumed me had transformed into a quieter understanding of human complexity and fallibility. I no longer saw my parents as evil villains, but as deeply flawed individuals who had made choices that caused significant harm. This shift in perspective didn't excuse their behavior, but allowed me to release some of the emotional weight I had been carrying. On that anniversary, Michael and I hosted a small gathering at our home to celebrate the Foundation's work and the community that had supported us through the difficult journey. As I looked around at the faces of people who had become my true family, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and peace. The journey had been painful and challenging, but it had also led me to a place of authenticity and self-acceptance that I might never have reached otherwise. Looking back on this experience, I've learned several important lessons about family, forgiveness, and self-worth. I've learned that family isn't just about blood relations, but about the people who choose to love and support us unconditionally. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior, but releasing the emotional burden that comes with holding onto anger and resentment. Most importantly, I've learned that our worth isn't determined by how others treat us, but by how we choose to treat ourselves and set boundaries that protect our well-being. As I continue to move forward, I carry these lessons with me, not as bitter reminders of past hurts, but as wisdom gained through difficult experience. The story of my family's betrayal and my journey to justice isn't just about financial exploitation or legal battles. It's about finding the strength to stand up for oneself, the courage to set boundaries, and the resilience to create a life of meaning and purpose despite the challenges we face. I want to leave you with a question to reflect on. Have you ever experienced favoritism or injustice in your family, and how did you handle it? Your stories and experiences matter, and sharing them can help others feel less alone in their struggles. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with others who might benefit from hearing it. Your support helps us continue sharing important stories that can make a difference in people's lives. Thank you for being part of this community, and I wish you strength, healing, and peace on whatever journey you're currently navigating. Remember that you deserve to be treated with love, respect, and fairness. Never settle for less than you deserve.